Imagine standing in a really brightly lit open plan office.
Just a normal Tuesday, right?
Right, but your heart is pounding in your throat, and tears are actually streaming down your face.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you are looking into the eyes of like 80 people who completely trusted you, who followed your vision.
And you have to tell them it's over.
Exactly. You have
Okay.
to tell them that as of today, they no longer have jobs.
That is just, that's gut-wrenching.
It gets worse, actually. Imagine going home that exact same night, right? Your company has just bled over $1 million in 30 days because of basically a math error.
$1 million.
Yeah, a month.
Yeah, in a month. And you realize you don't even have enough personal cash to buy your young son the bicycle he's been begging for all year.
Oh, man. That hurts.
And then you have to watch your wife quietly take off her gold wedding bangles, like her ultimate financial safety net, so you can go pawn them just to buy a kid's bike.
That doesn't even sound real. That sounds like the end of the road for someone. Right. It doesn't sound like the origin story of this massive success. It sounds like the kind of failure that just permanently breaks a person.
It's the absolute abyss, of professional and personal despair.
Mm-hmm.
When you hit that level of catastrophic loss, the human instinct is just to bury the story.
Absolutely. Hide the shame.
Exactly. You present this heavily filtered, sanitized version of reality to the world. But the person who lived through that specific nightmare didn't bury it.
No, he didn't. He documented it.
He laid it all out there.
And that, for you listening right now, is exactly why we are pulling you into this deep dive today. Because the man who lived that nightmare is Ankur Warikoo.
Who's now, one of the most prominent entrepreneurs and content creators on the internet.
Yeah, with tens of millions of people tuning into his advice. Today, we're taking a really close look at his highly acclaimed book, Do Epic Shit.
Which is such a great title, by the way.
It really is. But look, let me be clear about our mission right out of the gate here.
Yeah.
We are not here to read off a list of his CEO titles or his funding rounds,
Right. No one needs just another highlight reel.
Exactly. If you've ever felt like you're drowning in the pressure to have like a flawless career or to optimize every single minute of your morning routine.
And to never, ever make a mistake.
Yes. If you feel that, we are about to dismantle that entire illusion today.
Because that modern success narrative is, honestly, incredibly toxic.
Yeah.
It relies entirely on survivorship bias.
We only see the wins.
Right. We only see the end result. Warikoo's approach in this book is the antidote to that. He takes the very failures that would destroy most egos and uses them as the foundation.
And the format he uses to deliver this is, well, it's intentionally disjointed, isn't it?
It is, which is a brilliant reflection of how actual learning happens in the real world.
Yeah, he brings up this game from his school days in India called book cricket.
I love this concept.
Right. Basically, you flip a thick book open to a random page, and whatever the page number ends in, like a 4, 6, and 8, that dictates the runs you score for that turn.
It's totally random, totally driven by chance.
Exactly. And he tells the reader to treat his book the exact same way. You aren't supposed to, sit down and read it from chapter 1 to 20 like a textbook.
It's more of a buffet.
Yeah.
You open to a random page, you consume one single thought about money or habits, and you just let it sit with you.
The psychological framing there is really vital, I think. He explicitly says that the concepts in the book aren't meant to be revelations.
Right. They're meant to be reminders.
Yes, because a revelation is something entirely foreign, right? A new data point.
But a reminder is something your subconscious already knows to be true, because you've already experienced the pain of it,
You just haven't had the vocabulary to articulate it yet.
Exactly. And our goal in this conversation is to provide that vocabulary. We're going to analyze his hardest won lessons so you can apply them to the friction in your own life.
So let's start with the friction that defines almost everyone's early life, right? The terror of not making the cut.
Oh, yeah. The pressure is real.
Because before Warikoo was pawning his wife's bangles, he was just a teenager trying to get into college. And he introduces this concept that I genuinely think every professional should be forced to create.
The failure resume.
Yes. When he turned 41, instead of posting a list of his achievements, he published a failure resume. A chronological, brutal accounting of every time he fell flat on his face.
And to understand the weight of the very first entry on that resume, you have to look at the cultural architecture of the Indian education system.
Right, because his first major failure was being rejected by the IITs, the Indian Institutes of Technology.
For listeners outside of India, you really cannot overstate the mythical status of the IITs.
It's huge.
It is Harvard, MIT, and Stanford all rolled into one, but with an acceptance rate that is infinitely more punishing.
Yeah, for a middle-class family, getting a kid into an IIT is not just about education. It is viewed as a literal lottery ticket.
It alters the socioeconomic trajectory of the entire extended family, so the pressure cooker is just unimaginable.
Millions of kids competing for a handful of seats, parents mortgaging their futures for coaching institutes. And Wariku sits for the exam after 12th grade, and he completely fails.
And he writes that this was the very first time in his life he ever saw his father cry.
I can't even imagine. If you're 17 and your failure causes your father, like the stoic pillar of the family, to break down in tears.
That etches a permanent scar into your psyche. The guilt must be suffocating.
It creates an immediate crisis of identity, doesn't it?
Definitely. When your entire worth has been tied to an academic outcome, failing that means, in your own mind, you just cease to have value.
But he pivots. He's resilient. He decides to study physics at St. Stephen's, which is another incredibly prestigious place.
Right, and he gets all the way to the interview stage.
He sits across from this Dr. Wilson, who looks at this ambitious kid and just simply says, "I don't think you will be good in physics," and rejects him.
Just a complete gut punch to the ego.
But he's relentless. He tries for the IIT exams a second time during college. Fails again.
It's just failure after failure at this point.
Yeah, but eventually he makes it to a PhD program in the US, which, on paper, looks like the ultimate redemption arc. The prodigal son has recovered the fumble.
But then at age 24, he drops out.
Right. He realizes he doesn't actually want to be a research scientist.
He returns to India with absolutely zero money, zero plan, and no career prospects at all.
And his family and friends are just devastated all over again.
Look at the pattern of societal expectation versus internal alignment here. Going to the U.S. for a PhD was the society-approved path.
Definitely.
Dropping out was an act of internal alignment, but the external world views it as a catastrophic failure.
So he tries to get back on track. He decides to pursue an MBA, sits for the C exams to get into the IIMs, the business equivalent of the IITs.
And he doesn't even make the interview shortlist for a single top-tier school.
It's just a relentless drumbeat of rejection, and it leads right into his professional life, too. He gets an MBA from a different school, joins startup as a co-founder with a batchmate.
But he brings all this unresolved ego and insecurity into the role.
Yeah, he refuses to use technology to scale the business because he thinks he can outwork the software. He micromanages, refuses to admit when he's wrong.
And a year later, his own friend, his co-founder, fires him.
And Wariku actually admits today that his friend was 100% right to fire him. So he's 29, no money, fired, and adrift again.
Which brings us back to the psychological tipping point of the Nearby disaster you mentioned in the beginning.
Oh, right.
By the time he becomes CEO of Nearby, he has already weathered a lifetime of academic and early career rejection. He pitches 68 global investors to raise funds.
68. And 67 tell him no.
Exactly. One says yes, hands him a term sheet, and then retracts it at the 11th hour.
The desperation there must have been wild, and that desperation is what leads to the fatal business error, right?
Yes, the referral program.
Anyone who has ever worked in growth marketing knows how dangerous referral loops can be if the math is wrong.
Oh, absolutely lethal.
They launch a program to incentivize users to bring in new users, but they don't put in the proper checks and balances.
So the customer acquisition cost just spirals out of control.
Compared to the lifetime value of the customer, yeah. They literally bleed 11 crore rupees, over 1.3 million US dollars in a single month.
The mechanics of that failure are terrifying because they represent the dark side of exponential growth. A referral loop is designed to act like a virus.
Right.
When a virus is beneficial, you get a unicorn startup. When it's flawed and you are paying more to acquire a customer than they'll ever generate, exponential growth equals exponential bankruptcy.
The system worked exactly as designed. The design was just fundamentally lethal.
And the human toll of that lethal design is what brings a CEO to their knees.
Standing in front of 80 employees to lay them off isn't just looking at a spreadsheet. It's looking into the eyes of people who have mortgages.
People who have children.
People who believed in your leadership. And admitting that your incompetence has jeopardized their survival.
He even had to face the tenants subleasing his office space and tell them to vacate immediately because the company was broke.
And then the ultimate personal humiliation, the bicycle and the bangles. In Indian culture, a woman's gold jewelry is considered her absolute untouchable financial security.
It is the asset of last resort.
Yeah. For a husband to have to liquidate his wife's gold just to afford a kid's bicycle is a profound destruction of the traditional provider identity.
When they gave the boy the bike, he broke down crying, and both parents broke down crying. That isn't tears of joy. That is the release of unbearable stress.
Which really begs a critical question for you, the listener. Society trains us to view our lives through this rigid binary lens, right? You are a success or you are a failure.
Get the promotion, success, get fired, failure.
Exactly. We judge people entirely on the output. But Wariku points out something so obvious yet completely ignored. We do not live our lives in the output.
No, the output is just a split second in time. We live our entire lives in the messy, agonizing journey between those outputs.
Right. And if you validate yourself based solely on the final score of the game, you are invalidating your actual lived experience.
The world sees a CEO title and assumes a linear path of genius. The world doesn't see the panicked late-night math or the pawn jewelry.
If you allow the world's binary judgment to define your self-worth, you will always be fragile.
Always.
But I have to say, my initial reaction to this whole failure resume concept is honestly a bit skeptical.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, the self-help industry right now is obsessed with manifestation, right? Visualizing the win, toxic positivity, putting your worst moments on public display feels counterintuitive.
It feels like tattooing a warning sign on your forehead.
Yes. I am incompetent, do not trust me. Why dig up the trauma instead of focusing purely on the future?
Because ignoring the trauma takes an immense amount of subconscious energy. The friction you feel about publishing a failure resume is the friction of the ego trying to protect its false image. Wariku isn't wallowing in the past. He is weaponizing it through radical acceptance. If you hide your failures, you give them power over you.
You constantly fear being found out as a fraud.
Exactly. But if you lay them out on the table yourself, you strip them of their power.
It changes the metaphor. Instead of wearing your scars as a warning sign, it's like using your scars as a topographical map of your own resilience.
That's a great way to put it.
You run your fingers over the map and say, I survived the 11 Crore Valley, I survived the U.S. Dropout Mountain. Wariku says that when you undress in the dark, those scars tell a story only you know.
They are the actual currency that purchased his current success. The causality is undeniable, you know.
Because without the 11 crore mistake, he never develops that paranoid financial discipline for his next ventures.
Right. And without the humiliation of being fired by his friend at 29, he never learns how to dismantle his arrogance and manage with empathy.
The failures weren't detours from his path. They were the path.
Yes. He writes, "Don't wish for more scars, but surely be aware of the ones you have. Perhaps one day you will be proud of them as well."
And this leads to his ultimate thesis on redefining success. Society has this pre-packaged checklist. You get a corporate job. Success. Salary lower than your neighbor. Failure.
Married by 28, success. Divorced by 32, failure.
It is an exhausting, moving target that you can never actually hit.
Because the target was designed by a collective society that demands conformity, not individual happiness. The world's definition is based on easily observable metrics.
Money, titles, marital status, it cannot measure internal peace.
Right. Wariku's realization is that true self-awareness requires looking at this arbitrary checklist, recognizing it as a fiction created by strangers, and having the sheer audacity to rewrite the rules for yourself.
And if you build your own rule book and stay true to it, it doesn't matter if the outside world labels you a failure. You will feel grounded.
But the inverse is the real tragedy. If you betray your internal compass to satisfy the checklist, society might call you a success, but you'll wake up feeling hollow and miserable.
Because success isn't a relationship you have with society, it's a relationship you have with yourself.
Exactly. But philosophical alignment is really only half the battle. You can't just meditate on your failures and expect to magically become resilient.
No, surviving failure and rewriting your rule book requires an immense amount of daily energy. You need an architecture that supports your new philosophy.
And that transitions us perfectly into how Wariku views the actual mechanics of daily life, the architecture of action.
This is where his philosophy hits the pavement, right?
Yeah.
And he takes a stance that feels almost heretical in modern corporate culture.
Oh, totally. We're all taught to set massive, audacious goals.
Quarterly targets, 5-year plans, marathon finish lines. And Wariku looks at all of that and says it is complete garbage. He says targets are the enemy of habits. Don't set targets, set habits.
The psychological mechanism behind why goals fail is fascinating. When you set a target, say, losing 20 pounds, you place your entire sense of fulfillment into a future state.
You're telling your brain, I am not enough right now, but I will be enough when I cross that line.
Right. You grind, you sacrifice, you use immense willpower, and then you cross the line.
You had hit the target. And what happens to all that motivation? It instantly evaporates.
You stop running because the target is finite. The second you achieve it, the structure vanishes, and you revert right back to baseline behaviors.
Targets leave you barren because they are transactional. Habits, on the other hand, are infinite and transformational.
When you shift from the goal of running a marathon to the habit of being a person who runs every morning, you stop obsessing over a destination.
You start changing your present identity. Goals give you a momentary dopamine hit. Habits fundamentally rewire your neurological baseline.
He writes that targets leave you clueless once you achieve them, but habits hire you forever.
So, if we look closely at the habits he actually implements, we see this incredible obsession with controlling his own biology and his environment. Take his morning routine.
He wakes up at 4:30 a.m. every single day.
But he argues that the secret to waking up at 4:30 has absolutely nothing to do with alarm clocks or morning willpower.
Willpower in the morning is a myth.
Ugh.
If you go to bed at midnight and try to force yourself out of bed at 4:30 using 5 screaming alarms, you aren't building discipline.
You're just sleep depriving yourself. You'll be cognitively impaired all day.
Warwick points out that the foundation of waking up early is the ruthless discipline of going to sleep on time. The battle isn't won at 4:30 a.m., it's won at 9:30 p.m.
And this clicks into a much larger modern crisis, right? Going to sleep early sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things to do today.
Because you are actively fighting against the smartest minds in human history.
The engineers at social media companies, the algorithm designers, their entire multi-billion-dollar business model requires stealing your sleep time.
They study neuroscience to figure out exactly how to trigger dopamine loops to keep your thumb scrolling when your eyes can barely stay open.
It's the apex of the attention economy. Your attention is the product, and your sleep is the raw material.
And Warwick frames going to sleep on time not as a health tip, but as an act of radical rebellion.
Yes. It's a conscious decision to look at your phone and say, my physical restoration is more valuable than your algorithmic revenue.
Disconnecting is the ultimate boundary of self-love.
Reclaiming your autonomy. But speaking of autonomy, we have to talk about his calendar. When I first read about this, my chest literally tightened.
Because he schedules everything, right?
Every single minute. He treats his calendar like a sacred text. He sends emails to his future self, schedules his reading time, and he even schedules his afternoon naps.
15 minutes in the office, a full hour at home.
The cognitive science behind this is called offloading, isn't it?
Yeah, offloading. Every time you try to remember something, a meeting, groceries, a birthday, you are holding that in your working memory.
Which is incredibly limited and uses metabolic energy.
It's like having too many tabs open on your browser. The whole system slows down. By offloading every commitment onto a calendar, Warwick clears his mental RAM.
He believes his brain should be used for critical thinking, not for low-level data storage.
And the ultimate expression of this is how he manages his household. He gives his wife, Ruchi, 100% access to his calendar.
She can add, edit, or delete family events without ever asking him or negotiating for his time. If she drops a task into his Tuesday afternoon, it gets done. He calls it Productivity Max.
And he has a similar external brain hack using WhatsApp, which is incredibly elegant, the 2 WhatsApp self-groups hack.
I loved this. So he creates a WhatsApp group with a random contact and then immediately kicks that person out, leaving only himself.
And he does this twice, pins them both to the top.
The first group is named Docs Images. He dumps photos of his passport, flight tickets, PAN card, basically his tax ID.
The second group is called Thoughts. Whenever an idea strikes, he types it in or leaves a voice note. It's an instant capture system.
It eliminates the friction between having an idea and preserving it. But look, let's address the elephant in the room regarding this level of hyperscheduling.
The spontaneity argument.
Yeah, I have to be the voice of the listener here. When I hear about scheduling a 15-minute nap or having my spouse manage my time on a shared grid, it sounds dystopian.
Like living inside a spreadsheet.
Exactly. Where is the spontaneity? Where is the romance of a lazy Sunday morning where you just see where the day takes you? If every minute is accounted for, doesn't life become robotic?
That is the most common critique of time blocking, but it stems from a misunderstanding of what freedom actually feels like. People equate a blank calendar with freedom.
But what actually happens on a blank day?
You usually end up scrolling on your phone for 3 hours, feeling this low-grade anxiety because you know there are things you should be doing, but you haven't decided when to do them.
You aren't spontaneous, you are reactive.
Right. You are a hostage to your own procrastination.
Okay, I see the mechanism here. It's exactly like budgeting your finances. If you refuse to look at your bank account because you want the freedom to spend, you actually feel guilty every time you buy coffee.
Because you don't know if you can afford it.
Right. But if you have a strict budget that allocates $50 to coffee, you spend it with zero guilt. Wariku is just doing zero-based budgeting with his time.
That is the perfect analogy. Structure does not kill freedom. Structure creates the only true freedom, which is presence.
So if the calendar says play with kids from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m., he's not sitting there secretly worrying about an email.
Exactly. He knows he has email time scheduled for 8 a.m. the next morning. The structure absorbs the anxiety of the unknown. His mind is completely free to be present.
He makes a brilliant distinction. Your attendance doesn't define your discipline. Your attention does.
Being physically in the room while your mind is spiraling is useless. The calendar is simply the tool that allows him to direct his undivided attention to whatever's in front of him.
But there is a hidden danger here, right? You can build the most beautiful calendar, wake up at 4:30 a.m., and execute your habits flawlessly.
But if those habits are aimed at a destination you don't actually care about, you are just sprinting efficiently in the wrong direction.
It's like having a perfectly tuned Formula One car, but the steering wheel is locked pointing towards a cliff.
To unlock the steering wheel, you have to develop a brutal, uncompromising level of self-awareness.
Wariku says if he could travel back and give his 20-year-old self one piece of advice, it would be, make sure decisions in your life are made from a point of view of awareness and not ignorance.
Awareness is the operating system that runs all of his habits. Without it, the habits are useless. And the most significant barrier to this awareness is what he calls emotional debt.
I found this concept staggering. We all understand financial debt, right? You borrow money, ignore it, interest compounds, bank repossesses your car.
The mechanics are clear. But Wariku argues that emotional debt operates on the exact same compounding principles, and it is infinitely more lethal.
He claims emotional debt has destroyed far more lives than financial bankruptcy ever could.
Think about the mechanics of an emotional loan. You have a misunderstanding with a sibling. It's uncomfortable, so instead of addressing it, you swallow it.
You sweep it under the rug.
Right. That avoidance is borrowing against the future of the relationship. A year goes by, the unspoken tension acts as the interest rate, quietly compounding.
And 10 years later, a minor disagreement over dinner detonates into a screaming match, and the relationship is permanently severed.
You went emotionally bankrupt because you refused to pay the principal early on.
He lists these agonizing examples. The emotional debt of never saying I love you to aging parents because your family just doesn't do that.
Or never apologizing to a friend out of pure pride.
And the immense, soul-crushing debt of living your life based on what your neighbors expect of you. Money can be earned back, but emotional debt, as he writes, will continue to kill us within every single day we live.
And the primary reason we accumulate this debt is that we are biologically wired to fall into the comfort trap.
Human evolution designed us to seek safety, right? Warmth, a full stomach.
And modern society has optimized for these comforts. So the logical conclusion most people draw is that the ultimate goal of life is to get comfortable, get a stable job, a comfortable couch, and coast.
But Wariku argues this evolutionary wiring is a modern trap. Comfort is a destination, but if you park your car there and refuse to leave, you atrophy.
Happiness never comes from staying cool in a comfortable situation. Happiness is the byproduct of intentionally slaying your comfort. It is the friction of growth.
He actually advocates for actively seeking boredom and discomfort as a form of rebellion against our pacifying culture.
Because sitting alone in a room without a smartphone or music is profoundly uncomfortable for the modern brain. The amygdala starts firing.
Anxiety creeps in. Why? Because in the silence, you are forced to confront the emotional debt you've been ignoring.
You are forced to ask yourself if you are actually fulfilled or just comfortably numb.
And when you sit in that silence and realize, I hate my career, or this relationship is toxic, you face a terrifying crossroad.
You know you need to change, but the fear of the unknown paralyzes you. Wariku developed a 3-step mental framework to dismantle this exact paralysis.
It's rooted in Stoic philosophy, right? Negative visualization.
Or fear setting, yeah. Step 1, ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen if I make this change?
Step 2, Close your eyes and vividly imagine that worst-case scenario coming true.
Step 3. Ask yourself, will I be okay? Mentally, socially, financially. If the honest answer is yes, you do the thing.
The mechanism is about moving fear from the emotional center of the brain to the logical center. When fear is vague, like, what if I fail? It feels infinite.
But by defining the absolute worst-case scenario, you put a boundary around the fear. You realize the worst case usually isn't death.
It's usually temporary embarrassment or having to ask for your old job back. Once your brain calculates you can survive, the paralysis lifts.
But the framework gets trickier when the choice isn't between doing something scary or doing nothing. What happens when you face a dilemma of two seemingly great options?
Right, like, do you take the job with more equity or the higher base salary, move to New York for momentum, or Colorado for quality of life?
This is where self-awareness is truly tested because the human instinct is greed. We want to maximize utility.
Wariku argues that when faced with two divergent options, trying to pick both is almost universally the wrong strategy.
Because picking both is just cowardice dressed up as optimization. You're too afraid of missing out on one, so you delete your focus.
And you end up doing a mediocre job at the startup while complaining about the salary, and you fail at both.
Picking one path requires courage, because you have to mourn the death of the other option. But Wariku notes that if you commit fully to one choice, even if it's the wrong choice, the depth of your commitment guarantees you will extract a valuable lesson.
Picking one teaches you who you are. Picking both leaves you confused.
He has this visual metaphor for why we struggle to pick what we actually want, and it's so powerful.
Oh, the prison cell. I think about this all the time now. Imagine standing inside a prison cell. Your hands are wrapped tightly around the iron bars, looking out, feeling entirely trapped.
Trapped by parents' expectations, family gossip, lifestyle maintenance.
Exactly. But then you realize something bizarre about this cell. There are only bars in the front. There are no bars on the sides. The back is completely open.
You aren't physically trapped at all.
You could literally just let go, turn sideways, and walk out. But you choose to stay, gripping the bars, because the familiar misery of the prison feels safer than the vast, terrifying responsibility of total freedom.
The key to walking out, he says, is the terrifying act of asking, what do I want?
But bridging the gap between theory and reality is tough. Recognizing the cell is open is an intellectual exercise. Letting go is a physical action.
Awareness without action is just chronic, high-definition anxiety. You have to execute.
And there is no arena that punishes a lack of execution more brutally than the world of entrepreneurship.
Which brings us to the ultimate crucible. Wariku is known globally as an entrepreneur, officially since 2009, but unofficially since he was 11.
Renting comic books on a tarpaulin woven bed in his neighborhood. Made 11 rupees on his first day. It's the quintessential heartwarming origin story.
But he uses that story only to immediately tear down the romanticized mythology of startup culture. He states, with zero ambiguity, entrepreneurship is fucking hard.
The cultural narrative is so distorted by venture capital media right now. We celebrate funding rounds, unicorns, Forbes lists.
Wariku cuts through that with a brilliant analogy. He says congratulating a founder for raising funds is exactly like congratulating a chef for buying vegetables.
It is so accurate. Money is just the raw ingredient. Raising capital doesn't mean you built a business. You just convinced someone to let you borrow ingredients.
You haven't cooked the meal. You haven't proven anyone wants to eat it. By celebrating funding, founders think they crossed the finish line.
When really, they've just strapped a ticking time bomb of investor expectations to their chest.
The pressure of that bomb strips away all pretense. Entrepreneurship forces you to look in a brutal mirror, and what stares back is your unvarnished character.
And this leads to his observation about the competent asshole paradox.
Right. If forced to choose, employees would much rather work for a competent asshole than an incompetent nice guy.
Which goes against every HR manual. We're told empathy is the ultimate trait.
And it is important. But when a company's bleeding cash, layoffs looming, the ship taking on water empathy doesn't patch the hull. Competence does.
A competent leader who yells but knows how to navigate the crisis provides a baseline of security. An incompetent, nice leader holding your hand while going bankrupt offers zero security.
But Wariku adds a massive caveat. Apple founders only run companies. They do not build institutions.
That distinction is huge. A competent asshole drives short-term metrics through fear, but fear exhausts the nervous system. The best talent leaves.
Institutions where people feel respected, take risks, and the culture survives, even if the founder leaves. That requires a founder who transcends their ego.
And the foundation of that institution depends on who you hire. Wariku's hierarchy is strict. Attitude is greater than experience, which is greater than education.
You can teach almost any technical skill, but you cannot teach optimism or drive.
If you hire a highly educated pessimist, they will use their massive intellect to identify 100 reasons why an idea won't work.
They poison the culture with cynicism. An optimistic individual with no experience views roadblocks as puzzles. Skills never compensate for a toxic attitude.
He even redefines the word entrepreneurship. It's not a job title, it's a state of mind. You don't need to quit your corporate job and eat ramen to be an entrepreneur.
You can be an employee sitting in a cubicle and operate with an entrepreneurial mindset. The intrapreneur.
The antithesis of the "that's not in my job description" mentality, an entrepreneur looks at the department as if their own money is on the line.
They identify inefficiencies, suggest revenue streams, saying, "not my job" might let you survive the bureaucracy, but it guarantees you'll never be indispensable.
To cultivate that ownership, you have to use trust. And Wariku points out that trust is a scarce commodity. Most companies operate on suspicion.
You have to earn trust over years. Wariku flips this. His competitive advantage is that he trusts his team on day one.
He pays his interns and staff on the first day of the month in advance. He grants autonomy immediately.
It's the Pygmalion effect. People rise to the level of expectation placed upon them. If you treat someone like a thief, they'll steal. If you treat them with absolute trust, they will move mountains to never betray it.
Okay, I have to step in and challenge this because his first boss told him, if I can't trust you, it doesn't matter how smart you are. But we just discussed an unchecked referral program run by his team that cost him $1 million in 30 days.
Right.
How do you reconcile handing out day one absolute autonomy with the catastrophic financial risk of a fatal error? Doesn't blind trust just invite ruin?
It's a critical distinction. Trusting someone's character does not mean abandoning operational guardrails. The 11 crore loss was a failure of systems mathematical checks and balances. But trusting the individual to operate autonomously within their domain is different. If you micromanage your team, what happens when a crisis hits?
They freeze. Or they just look at you and say, you're the boss, you fix it.
Exactly. Wariku highlights a profound dynamic. The hardest moment in leadership is when you make a mistake and let your team down.
Yeah.
But the most precious moment is when you fall, and your team, because you deposited trust into them from day one, steps up and carries you. You could only build that culture if you relinquish control.
That shifts the whole paradigm from a hero founder to a collective organism. But let's be honest, the primary reason 99% of people endure entrepreneurship or climb the corporate ladder is to make money.
We all want the payout.
And Wariku's own turbulent relationship with money serves as a masterclass in unlearning our toxic financial programming. Which brings us to the lies of the middle class.
To understand his financial philosophy, you have to understand the scarcity of his childhood. Money was a constant source of stress. They were perpetually in debt.
His father told him growing up poor forces a choice. Chase money forever or grow beyond the need for it.
And his initial reaction was to hate money. He viewed it as the root of misery. But he realized in his 20s that dismissing money doesn't make you superior. It makes you financially illiterate.
Because he disrespected money, he made catastrophic errors when he started earning it. He took massive loans for real estate, seduced by property appreciation, ignoring carrying costs and taxes.
Negative cash flow. And to pay the debt, he treated startup investing like a casino, hoping one hit would clear his ledger.
But the mistake that hurts to read is how he handled mutual funds. He would diligently invest, but every time he hit a cash crunch from real estate debt, he liquidated the funds.
He endured the slow, boring years of accumulation, and right at the inflection point where compounding curves upward, he breaks the fund, resets the clock on the eighth wonder of the world.
It's financial self-sabotage driven by a lack of liquidity. And it culminated in a deeply humbling dynamic with his wife, Ruchi. He was the hotshot MBA, mocked her for buying physical gold and boring mutual funds.
Told her she was wasting returns.
And the irony, when his high-risk bets failed and real estate became a trap, it was her slow, boring investments that saved their family from absolute ruin on 3 separate occasions.
The turtle bailed the hare out of bankruptcy. Through this, Wariku identified the 10 lies of the middle class.
These generational myths that prevent people from building wealth. Let's look at lie number 4. Buying jewelry is an investment.
A massive cultural blind spot universally applied to luxury goods. We convince ourselves dropping thousands on a designer necklace is storing wealth.
Wariku violently pops this bubble. He says gold bullion is an investment. Jewelry is a liability disguised as an asset.
The math proves it. When you buy jewelry, you pay a massive premium for craftsmanship, brand markup, retail overhead. If you try to sell it the next day, you instantly lose 20% to 30%.
We desire to signal status but feel guilty about vanity. So we label the vanity purchase an investment to soothe our conscience. Mixing vanity with investment guarantees terrible returns.
Then there's line number 5. Buying a house early in life is the ultimate goal, and renting is throwing money away.
The societal pressure to buy a home in your 20s is immense, the ultimate marker of arriving as a responsible adult. But mathematically, an early mortgage is a trap.
When you lock into a 30-year mortgage, you anchor yourself to a specific geography, a job market, and a massive fixed monthly cost.
In your 20s, your greatest asset is mobility. If an incredible opportunity opens in another city or you want to join a startup, a massive mortgage makes that pivot terrifying.
You trade the most dynamic years of your life for a deed to a building mostly owned by the bank.
Which leads into line number 8. Your salary dictates your wealth. People believe climbing the ladder for a higher salary is the path to riches.
But a salary is simply the act of renting out your time.
Renting your time versus owning assets, that's the light bulb moment. If you earn a high salary but spend it all on a mortgage and luxury cars, you aren't wealthy. You're a highly paid indentured servant.
True wealth is determined by how much you own of assets equities, businesses that generate cash flow while you sleep.
The culmination of unlearning these lies shifts how you view money itself. The middle class views money as a tool to purchase stuff to impress people they don't care about.
Wariku realizes the highest use of money is to buy freedom.
Freedom from anxiety, freedom from a toxic boss. But I want to push back on his prescription here. He says in your 20s, you should live like a pauper.
Strip expenses to the bone.
Yeah, put every cent into investments and take massive risks. But your 20s are the prime decade of physical life. That's when you have energy to travel, explore. Is he saying lock yourself in a room and stare at a calculator?
It's easy to interpret live like a pauper as a miserable existence, but the mechanism is the opposite. Keeping fixed costs near zero isn't about hoarding cash. It's about buying the agility to take risks.
Walk me through how that enables exploration.
If you graduate and finance a BMW in a luxury apartment, your monthly burn rate is $4,000. You must maintain a high-paying, stressful corporate job. You lock your own prison door.
Right.
But if you live in a cheap apartment with roommates and drive a beat-up Honda, your burn rate is tiny. You can afford to quit your job and backpack South America for 6 months. You can afford to move cities with no job, start a weird company that might fail. Keeping liabilities low buys you the freedom to explore without catastrophic consequences.
The pauper lifestyle is a defensive shield for maximum offensive maneuvering. And the goal of all this, freedom, habits, awareness, is to preserve emotional bandwidth for our relationships.
The final, most profound section, relationships and self-love. Wariku leans on Adlerian psychology, from the courage to be disliked. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems.
Every point of friction traces back to how you interact with another human, and he makes this observation. It is rare, almost impossible, for a mean, conniving, bigoted person to truly love themselves.
The way we treat the external world is a perfect mirror of our internal world. It is psychological projection.
If you loathe yourself, the dissonance is too painful, so you externalize it. You tear others down because temporarily making someone small simulates superiority.
A person with genuine self-love has zero desire to inflict pain. They don't need to.
We accept the love we think we deserve and distribute the venom we are choking on ourselves. To stop this spread, Wariku offers a practical life hack. Do not show up for every argument you are invited to.
An argument requires friction from two sides. It's a fire, and your emotional reaction is the oxygen.
When someone throws a verbal punch, your ego wants to defend your status. But if your response is silence, the fire suffocates. You are not obligated to attend just because you are invited.
The ego suppression required to leave a text unread is monumental, but the peace is worth it. And talking about ego and triggers brings us to our parents.
Wariku writes with deep reverence for his parents, but he delivers a jarring reality check. Your parents are first humans, then parents.
Particularly in Eastern cultures, parents are elevated to infallible deities, but humans are deeply flawed, carrying unresolved trauma.
If you view them purely as parents, you expect perfect, unconditional love. When they fail, it destroys your worldview. Accepting they are humans doing their best with limited tools allows you to love, forgive, and set boundaries.
He notes that true independence requires financial independence. Taking their money gives them leverage over your choices.
This concept of seeking guidance outside the family brings us to mentorship. We gravitate toward the Michelin star mentor. You're a junior marketer, so you want the CMO of a Fortune 100 company.
And it is almost entirely useless.
Exactly. If a CEO is 20 years ahead, your daily friction formatting a report, navigating a manager's ego is foreign to them. Their platitudes about vision don't help your Tuesday morning meeting.
If you want to learn to dice an onion, asking a 3-star chef is pointless. They haven't held a knife wrong in 30 years.
Yeah.
You need the line cook who figured out the trick last week.
The Subway sandwich mentor model. You don't buy a prepackaged meal, you customize it. You need multiple mentors, 1 or 2 steps ahead in specific areas.
Fitness investing, office politics. They possess actionable context.
I want to close our analysis with the letters to his children, Vidor and Uzma. He roots his advice in painful memories, like the bicycle story. He reminds Vidor that years later, Vidor said his greatest gift wasn't the bicycle, but his little sister.
Anchoring children to human connection over material acquisition. And he writes about privilege. You won the genetic lottery. Don't ever be proud of it. Be grateful for it.
He begs his kids to reject the world's definition of success. Live your own life, not someone else's. But as a parent, isn't that terrifying?
Totally.
The world grades their exams, pays their salaries. If you tell them to ignore society's metrics, aren't you setting them up to be unemployable outcasts?
It is terrifying because we want our kids to fit in the herd. But Wariku's advice isn't blind rebellion. It's establishing an internal locus of control.
Explain the difference there.
If a child's self-worth is predicated on an external locus, getting the A+I or the title, they are fragile. They've handed their stability to a boss or algorithm. Wariku wants them to derive self-worth from conduct, not titles. If they are relentlessly curious and empathetic, the world will eventually value them. And if they face an 11-core failure, their core identity won't shatter.
It's the ultimate shock absorber. We have traversed a massive landscape today. We started with the failure resume, understanding scars are the currency of the future. We dismantled goal setting, replacing it with an architecture of habits.
We explored emotional debt, fear setting, the prison cell of expectations. We looked into the mirror of entrepreneurship, learning only leaders who trust with day one autonomy build lasting institutions.
We unlearned middle-class lies about jewelry and mortgages, realizing wealth is the freedom to explore without anxiety. And we saw that relationships are reflections of the grace we demand of ourselves.
Remember the book Cricket Rule. You don't need to implement all of this by tomorrow. Let the reminders hit you when you are ready.
But there is one final reminder. In the epilogue, Wariku reveals his ultimate superpower, his relationship with time. He guards it with a ferocity bordering on obsession.
When startups fail and the world is in chaos, how you allocate your minutes is the only tentpole holding your life up.
Time is unrenewable. You can make $1 million back, but you can't buy back an hour scrolling on your phone. He closes by asking the reader, what is your superpower? What intrinsic mechanism do you rely on when nothing else is working?
We all have one, even if it's buried under emotional debt.
And as you, the listener, go about the rest of your day, I want to leave you with a challenge that brings this full circle. Wariku shattered the illusion of success by laying out his most humiliating failures, and it became the foundation of his empire. So think about this. If you were forced to publish your own failure resume on the internet tomorrow morning, what is the single biggest, most embarrassing, ego-crushing failure you would have to write at the very top of that page? And more importantly, if you look closely at the mechanics of that exact failure today, how has it secretly been preparing you